Hi, this is my art final that I'm going to be presenting on the foundational object that I chose. So, the object that I chose is this painting that's in my house. The reason that I chose it is because in all the houses that I've lived in, it's always been like a centerpiece. It used to like hang in the middle of the living room, and now it hangs in the middle of my entryway. What really drew me to it is first its size. It's a pretty large painting, and also just like the beautiful vibrant colors and the unique texture that it has. The paint kind of like sticks up off the surface and it just looks like something nice to touch, and it's just very eye-catching. Um, my parents didn't even know like who the artist was when I asked them, or like where she was from or anything about it. So that was another thing that made me really want to learn more about the painting, and part of the reason that I wanted to like investigate it. So to try to find out a little bit more about this painting, I first checked on the back to see if there was, a name of the artist or like the name of the painting, and I found a little card that had both. So the artist's name is Maya Eventov, and something really interesting is that my parents actually bought the painting in Florida, but Maya Eventov is an artist from the Soviet Union, or what was the Soviet Union and is now Russia. So she was born in the Soviet Union in the 1960s, and she studied in an art school there and pursued art there, and then eventually moved to Canada, which I thought it was kind of interesting that her painting ended up in Florida. So I first want to talk about some of the elements of the painting. The painting's actually called Tuscan Series 4, so it's part of a series of paintings of these beautiful hills of Tuscany. That's obviously like the first thing that stands out to you, is that it's just like these beautiful vibrant colors. They're really like bright and warm toned. The second thing that you notice is the texture, which, as I before stated, is like really unique. It kind of sticks up off the page. What I'm thinking is that it was painted like partially with a palette knife, so it's not really like any other paintings that I've seen in person. So you can like see the brush strokes, you can see like the globs of paint. The size of the painting is one of its like main elements. It's like 40 inches by 40 inches, so it's a pretty large painting. And then obviously, as far as what's in the painting, it's a landscape, and it's got this nice perspective that you see out into the valley. Um, this painting, I feel like, really draws from elements of the Impressionist style, but also the Expressionist, and it has a nice combination of elements of both that take from Maya Eventov's different learning over the years. So my first comparison image is this beautiful painting by Monet, who was one of the most famous Impressionist painters. It's of his water lily garden, which he has many paintings of. A little background on Impressionism is that during the 1800s in Europe, there was like the standard for art was set by this Salon de Paris, and they only really accepted art on religion, mythology, history, and it was all very realistic, very muted colors, blended brush strokes, and just like generally all the artists' paintings would look kind of the same because they were all painting in the same style and the same subject matter. So a group of painters decided, including Monet, that they didn't want to paint that anymore. So they like basically moved out into the countryside and started painting things like as they were. They started painting landscapes. And because they were painting things that were, were moving and like adapting, they needed to do it quickly. So that created this new style that was like quick brush strokes, like unblended paint, and like you blend it with your eyes instead of like on the paper, and it just like isn't as meticulously realistic, which is kind of what you see here with like Monet's painting. One of the interesting things about this painting is that he actually did like tons of them, and it was because he wanted to see the different effect of like light at different times of day on the images. And so a big focus of this painting is like the shadows. Some of the similarities that you can see between these two paintings is that they both have like interesting texture. Like you can see the brushstrokes, you can see the paint. It's not blended, you blend it with your eye, which was a real change from what was happening before in Europe in the early 1800s. The Monet painting and the Eventov painting both have like more bright colors, like much less muted than was from before. They have like layered paint, and as opposed to depicting, people or historical figures, they depict nature, and they depict, life as it was, as opposed to life as people may have thought it was during ancient times. Another thing that was kind of important between these two that you can see that are similar is that they both sacrifice very strict realism to emphasize other elements. So like they're not as like meticulously detailed as paintings from before because they want to emphasize different things. And I feel like with the water lily painting, he's really focusing on like the shadows and the light and the beauty of the landscape. And in the Tuscan painting, she's really focusing on just like the colors and like the feelings and just like the beauty of it all, as opposed to like making it so realistic. Some of the differences, obviously they're not exactly the same. The Tuscan one is more focusing on like less nature and more like humans in nature, because it has all these like houses and farms, whereas opposed to Monet's painting has evidence of humans through the bridge, but mostly focuses on the like surroundings. The Tuscan painting is more colorful, like the colors are brighter, but both of them are definitely more colorful compared to the style that was present before. So this is the other painting that I really want to compare the Tuscan painting to, because I feel like it's a very typical Expressionist painting. It's a mountain and two sheds. And a little background on Expressionism. It came about 100 years after Impressionism, and it originated in Germany. The whole idea was that there was a lot of urbanization and technological buildup going on, and some of the artists really rebelled against this, and they felt that people were losing connection with the spiritual world and losing connection with nature. So they started to paint things that really portrayed, as opposed to realism, their feelings and what was going on in their mind. And that's why like a lot of Expressionist paintings sacrifice stark realism for distortion to portray feelings and to portray ideas. Both of these paintings have distinct textures. So obviously the Tuscan painting has the more raised textures, but the Expressionist painting also has visible lines. In both of them, you can see the brushstrokes, you can see where the artist was painting. They both depict natural landscapes that show humans inhabiting them. So the Tuscan series shows like a town, it has houses, it has farms, and the Expressionist painting shows that these mountain and this landscape is actually starting to be inhabited because there's these two sheds here. Both of them have like a nice atmospheric perspective. So you see, in the Tuscan painting by Eventov, you can kind of see back and it goes and gives you some like distance, which is sort of the same thing with the mountain and two sheds. It starts, you have the shed in the front, and then it kind of fades back into the mountains. So both of these, sacrifice realism for other things, but in the Expressionist one, it's more like distorted shapes and less realistic colors. So like obviously sheds aren't, like roofs aren't always blue, and mountains aren't always purple, and skies aren't always green. And, the shapes aren't perfect, but it really distorts that to give you this feeling and that what was going on in the artist's mind. Also, the Expressionist painting has cooler colors, whereas the Tuscan painting has more warmer colors. But overall, they both have the same feeling of lack of realism and focus on the texture of the painting and the intent of the artist with the brush that you can see through the strokes. Overall, when you look at this painting by Maya Eventov, It doesn't feel like it necessarily fits in a specific category. Like, it's not fully an Impressionist painting, but it's also not fully an Expressionist painting, which is why I really feel like it draws from characteristics of both. Something that I found interesting was that Eventov was born pretty close after the Expressionist movement happened, yet her work seems to be more influenced by the Impressionists. It holds more resemblance to the more realistic, less distorted, more vivid paintings of Impressionism as opposed to the kind of manipulated Expressionist painting. It's really a beautiful painting. And the fact that Eventov has this interesting background where she like grew up in the Soviet Union and was like born into art and went to like an art high school and like moved to Canada, I just feel like this painting draws from so many different things, and it's just, you can't pin it down, but it just has these feelings of elements of both movements that I find really beautiful.